Before we had cities, before we had laws, even before we were farming, there was God, or at least the idea of God. Today, we're going to dive into Karen Armstrong's incredible work, A History of God, to really get a handle on what might just be humanity's longest and maybe most ambitious creative project.
And that brings us right to the heart of it, to the big electrifying question of this whole journey. Did God create us, or did we create God? Now hang on, this isn't just some clever philosophical riddle. The answer, as we're about to see, tells a really profound story about who we are.
So, what's the core idea we're exploring? It's that the concept of God isn't some ancient statue, frozen in time. Not even close. Armstrong argues that it's actually a living, breathing idea that has grown, changed, and evolved right alongside us. And this quote just hits the nail on the head. Armstrong says each generation has to create the image of God that works for it. Just think about that for a second. Our earliest ancestors, totally awestruck by the cosmos, they saw gods in the sun and the moon. Later on, when we formed tribes and were fighting for survival, well, we needed a warrior god. And as our societies got more and more complex, guess what? So did our idea of God. It has always been in motion. This leads to this really fascinating idea of God as a kind of creative project. We haven't just been passive believers, sitting back and accepting things. Armstrong's point is that we've been active co-creators for thousands of years. And when one version of God just doesn't speak to our reality anymore, when it stops offering meaning, we don't just scrap the whole project. Nope, we reinvent it. Okay, so this is a really crucial point. Whether or not God is real in some measurable way, the idea of God is an undeniable and incredibly powerful psychological fact. And this isn't just some nice story we tell ourselves. It's a fundamental part of being human. It's this powerful framework for finding meaning and comfort in what is a beautiful but, let's be honest, often chaotic world. To really wrap our heads around this, let's look at the ancient Greeks. They had two totally different words for knowledge, logos and mythos. Logos, well, that's the world of facts, figures, and logic. It's how we build skyscrapers, write computer code, and land rovers on Mars. It's all about the how. But mythos is different. That's the world of stories, of symbols, of meaning. It's how we make sense of our lives, our sorrows, and our place in this whole crazy universe. It's the why. And that is exactly where the idea of God fits in. Armstrong argues that God has always belonged to the world of mythos, not logos. See, it's not a scientific theory you can prove or disprove in a lab. It's a story we tell ourselves to make sense of everything. Science can tell us how the universe works, but it can't tell us why any of it matters. That, my friends, is a job for mythos. All right, so all of this brings us to a huge turning point. The Abrahamic traditions, that's Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. This is where we see a massive, truly revolutionary shift in how we think about God. We go from all these local, tribal gods to a single, universal God who acts on the world stage. And just look at how this idea transforms over time. With Abraham, God goes from being some distant nature spirit to a personal partner in a real historical project. Then with Moses, that partnership becomes radically ethical. Suddenly, knowing God means you have to pursue social justice. Then with Jesus, the image shifts again to that of a loving, intimate father. And finally, with Muhammad, God becomes truly universal, the transcendent God of all worlds, and yet, as the Quran says, closer to you than your own jugular vein. You see? Each step is a complete reimagining. But as this idea of one God grew up, a really powerful new tension started to build. A central question that would just echo for centuries. How do we actually know God? Is it an intellectual thing, or is it an emotional one? Is it a matter of the head, or is it a matter of the heart? For centuries, you had these brilliant philosophers from all three traditions. We're talking heavyweights like Maimonides, Aquinas, and Ibn Rushd. And they worked like crazy to prove that faith and reason were perfect partners. They argued that the more we understand the rational, logical laws of the universe, the more we understand the mind of God himself. And this way of thinking, wow, it reached its absolute peak with the philosopher Ibn Sina. He basically argued that God is a mathematical necessity, not a person, but a pure principle. The uncaused cause, the one logical starting point that simply has to exist to get everything else going. In a way, he had proven God with nothing but pure, cold logic. But
There's a problem with a God that's purely logical, isn't there? I mean, he's perfect, sure, but he's also distant, abstract, and maybe a little cold. As Armstrong asks, can you really find comfort in a mathematical formula? For most people, that's a hard no. And that's when the mystics just burst onto the scene with this thrilling alternative. The great scholar Al-Ghazali argued that, sure, reason can get you to God's front door, but to get inside, you have to feel. He famously said, you can't understand the word sweet by reading its definition, you have to taste it. For the mystics, God wasn't a puzzle to be solved. God was an experience to be lived. This incredible debate between reason and mysticism has been raging for centuries. Much later, during the Enlightenment, you had scientific giants like Isaac Newton, who kind of revived that idea of a logical, distant God, the ultimate watchmaker, a brilliant cosmic engineer who designed the universe, wound it up, and then just let it run on its own. The ultimate hands-off manager, right? So after this incredible journey, where does all of this leave us today? In our modern world of science and technology, in an age of creeping secularism, does the idea of God even have a future? Armstrong argues that the answer is a resounding yes. And why? Because science can tell us how we die with breathtaking, microscopic precision, but it can't tell us how to bear the sorrow of that death. That's a job for mythos. And as long as we humans have to face our own mortality, we're going to need stories and concepts that help us make sense of it all. So what does the future of God look like? Armstrong sees two major paths branching off ahead of us. On one side, you've got fundamentalism, which is often a fearful, rigid, and defensive response to the complexities of the modern world. But on the other side, you have the path of the mystics, a more open, flexible, and compassionate approach that finds the divine not in rigid rules, but in our shared humanity. In the end, the history of God is really the history of us. It's the epic story of our relentless, beautiful, and sometimes desperate search for meaning in a complicated world. And as long as we keep asking those big, scary, wonderful questions, well, it seems we'll keep creating new answers, new stories, and maybe, just maybe, new gods.